Karen was having one of those days. You know the kind, where everything seems to go wrong and you're convinced the universe is out to get you. She had woken up late after hitting snooze 5 times, spilled coffee on her favorite blouse, and now she was stuck in traffic because some guy decided it was okay to back into 3 cars at once. By the time she pulled into the parking lot of the community center, steam practically poured out of her ears. She got out of her car, smoothing down her skirt as if that would somehow fix the chaos of her morning. The plan for today? A quick workout at the gym inside the center. Nothing fancy, just enough to blow off steam before heading home to deal with whatever else life threw at her. But when she walked up to the front desk, things didn't exactly go as planned. "Hi," Karen said sharply, tapping her nails against the counter. "I need access to the gym." The young woman behind the desk looked up from her screen. She smiled politely but seemed distracted. "Sure thing. Do you have your membership card?" Karen froze. Membership card? What did she look like? A walking filing cabinet? She didn't carry around pieces of plastic anymore. Who even does that these days? Instead, she leaned forward slightly, narrowing her eyes. "Look," she began, her voice rising just enough to make the receptionist sit up straighter. "I've been coming here for years. I paid for a lifetime membership during that charity gala they hosted ages ago. So unless someone deleted my account by accident, I should be good to go." The receptionist blinked, clearly caught, off guard. She tapped away at her keyboard, searching for any trace of Karen's name. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds, she shook her head apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see anything under your name. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Karen interrupted, throwing her hands up dramatically. "It's me we're talking about here. How hard is it to find my information?" Her tone was sharp enough to cut glass, and a few people nearby glanced over curiously. One older man sitting in the corner raised an eyebrow, but quickly went back to reading his newspaper. "Now, let's pause for a second. If you've ever worked retail or customer service, you already know how this story might unfold. People like Karen aren't exactly rare. They show up everywhere armed with misplaced confidence and a knack for making everyone else uncomfortable. And while most folks would shrug their shoulders and move on, Karen wasn't about to give up so easily. "I'll prove it myself," she muttered under her breath, marching toward the side entrance. Ignoring the sign that read "Authorized Personnel Only," she pushed open the door with more force than necessary. Inside, she found herself standing in a narrow hallway lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. To her left, another door led deeper into the building. Perfect. This must be the shortcut to the gym. But when she tried to pull the next door open, it wouldn't budge. She yanked harder, twisting the handle until her knuckles turned white. Still nothing. Frustrated, she stepped back and glared at the stubborn piece of metal like it had personally offended her. That's when she noticed something strange. The first door she'd come through had clicked shut behind her. Her stomach dropped. She tugged on it instinctively, but it was locked tight. Panic bubbled up in her chest as realization dawned. She was trapped. Trapped between 2 doors with no way out. For a moment, all she could do was stand there, staring blankly at the walls as her mind raced. Hadn't anyone heard her come in? Didn't they realize she was stuck? Outside, the receptionist frowned at the security monitor showing Karen pacing anxiously in the vestibule. What do we do now?" she whispered to her coworker, who shrugged helplessly. Meanwhile, Karen pounded on the glass, yelling loud enough for half the building to hear. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice echoing eerily in the small space. "Let me out right now." And just like that, what started as a bad day spiraled into something far worse. Little did Karen know this was only the beginning of her very public misadventure, one that would leave her humiliated, furious, and ultimately unforgettable. Karen stood frozen for a moment, staring at the locked doors like they were mocking her. Her heart thudded in her chest as panic clawed its way up her throat. She was stuck, truly, utterly stuck, and no one seemed to care. Outside she could hear faint voices and footsteps, but none of them came close enough to notice her predicament. "This is insane," she muttered under her breath, her voice trembling slightly. "How does this even happen?" She tried the handles again. yanking with all her might, but neither door budged. Frustration bubbled over, and she slammed her palm against the glass. The sound echoed loudly in the small space, making her flinch. For a split second, she thought, someone might have heard her. But when nothing happened, the reality sank in deeper. She was on her own. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She whipped it out, hoping maybe, just maybe, there'd be a text or call from someone who could help. Instead, it was just an old notification about a sale at her favorite store. Great, just what she needed right now, a reminder that life loved kicking her when she was already down. With shaky fingers, she dialed her husband's number. He picked. Up after 3 rings, his voice calm and distracted. "Hey," he said, barely paying attention. "What's up?" "What's up?" Karen snapped, her voice rising an octave. "I'm trapped, like literally trapped between 2 doors at this stupid community center." There was a long pause on the other end. Finally, he spoke, sounding more confused than concerned. "Wait, what do you mean trapped? Did you lock yourself in a bathroom or something?" "No, I did not lock myself in a bathroom," she hissed, pacing back and forth in the tiny space. "I came in through the side door because these idiots won't let me into the gym, and now both doors are locked. I can't get out." Another pause. Then, almost reluctantly, he asked, "Did you try asking someone to let you out?" Karen stopped pacing and stared at the phone like it had betrayed her. Asking for help? From them? The same people who refused to acknowledge her lifetime membership? No way. She wasn't giving them the satisfaction of seeing her beg. "I don't need their help," she growled. "Just figure something out, call the police or something, or better yet, come here and fix this mess yourself." He sighed heavily, clearly not thrilled about being dragged into her drama. "Look, I'm at work right now. I'll see if I can leave early, but it'll take at least an hour. Can't you just wait it out?" "Wait it out?" Karen shrieked, her voice bouncing off the walls around her. "Are you kidding me? I'm standing here like some kind of prisoner while everyone ignores me. This is ridiculous." On the other end, her husband mumbled something about calming down before hanging up. Karen stared at the phone in disbelief. Was he serious? Calm down. How was she supposed to stay calm when she was stuck in this nightmare? Fuming, she turned her attention back to the doors. Maybe she missed something. Maybe there was a button or switch hidden somewhere that would unlock them. She pressed her face against the glass, squinting at the edges of the frame. Nothing, just smooth metal and cold, unyielding locks. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slow. Each second felt like an eternity as frustration gave way to embarrassment. What must people think if they saw her like this? Stuck between 2 doors yelling at invisible forces. She imagined the whispers, the judgmental looks, the smirks behind her back. The thought made her cheeks burn. But then, something strange happened. A shadow moved outside the main entrance. Someone was coming closer. Hope surged in her chest as she banged on the glass again, waving her arms wildly. "Hey, over here, hello!" The shadow hesitated, then disappeared. Karen groaned in exasperation. Of course. Why would anyone stick around to help her? They probably thought she was crazy. And honestly, who could blame them? If she saw someone pounding on a door and shouting like a lunatic, she'd probably walk away too. As the initial adrenaline wore off, exhaustion began to creep in. Her legs ached from pacing, and her throat felt raw from yelling. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor. For the first time since walking into the building, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. In, out, in, out. It was during this rare moment of quiet that she noticed something odd. There was a faint hum coming from above her head, a mechanical, whirring sound that hadn't been there before. She glanced up, squinting at the ceiling. Was that a camera? Her stomach twisted. Had someone been watching her this whole time? Recording her meltdown like some sort of daytime TV spectacle? The idea sent a fresh wave of humiliation crashing over her. If anyone dared post footage of this online, she swore she'd sue them, or at least demand a formal apology. Just as she was working herself into another frenzy, the outer door clicked open. Startled, Karen scrambled to her feet, smoothing her clothes as if preparing for a job interview. A maintenance worker stepped inside, looking mildly amused. "You okay in here?" he asked casually, like finding people trapped between doors was part of his daily routine. Karen opened her mouth to respond but found herself at a loss for words. Should she apologize? Demand answers? Throw a tantrum? Before she could decide, he motioned for her to follow him. "Come on, let's get you out of there." Reluctantly, she obeyed, stepping cautiously through the doorway. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the inner door swung shut behind her with a soft click. She winced, half expecting alarms to blare or lights to flash. But nothing happened. It was eerily quiet. For a moment, she considered storming out of the building, and never looking back. But pride or stubbornness kept her rooted to the spot. No way was she leaving without proving her point. She had every right to be here, damn it. And if they didn't believe her now, she'd make sure they regretted doubting her later. Little did Karen know her ordeal was far from over. Outside, the receptionist pulled up the security footage of her frantic struggle. One glance at the screen and a slow grin spread across her face. Without hesitation, she hit record. Karen had no idea what was about to hit her. She stood in the lobby, still fuming from her ordeal, trying to act like nothing unusual had happened. But somewhere behind the scenes, the wheels of chaos were already turning. The receptionist, the same one who'd politely denied her access earlier, was now glued to the security monitor, watching the replay of Karen's frantic struggle between the doors. At first, the receptionist just chuckled softly, shaking her head at the absurdity of it all. Then an idea popped into her mind. What if? Just for fun, she forwarded a short clip of Karen yelling and banging on the glass to her best friend. "You won't believe this," she typed in the text message. "Some lady tried to break in and got herself locked between two doors. Her friend replied almost instantly, 'Send it to me right now.'" Within minutes, the video was shared again, with another coworker, then another, and another. Before long, it wasn't just office gossip anymore. It was everywhere. By lunchtime, the internet had exploded. Someone posted the clip online under the caption, "Karen tries to force entry, ends up trapped like a Looney Tune." People couldn't get enough. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. Some laughed until they cried. Others added their own commentary, turning Karen's misfortune into memes and jokes that spread like wildfire across social media platforms. One user edited the video to add cartoon sound effects, a loud boing every time Karen slammed her hands against the glass. Another superimposed dramatic music over her shouting, making it look like a scene straight out of a slapstick comedy movie. Soon, hashtags like Trapped Karen and Door Drama started trending worldwide. Even local news channels picked up the story, airing snippets of the viral video during their evening broadcasts. Back at the community center, Karen remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. She sat stiffly in a chair near the exit, arms crossed tightly over her chest, glaring at anyone who dared glance her way. Every so often, someone would walk by, snicker, or quickly hide their phone. At first, she assumed they were talking about something else, or maybe mocking her outfit. But as more people passed by whispering and giggling, suspicion began to creep in. "What are you all looking at?" she snapped finally, turning her glare on a group of teenagers huddled nearby. They froze, wide-eyed, before scattering like leaves in the wind. One of them dropped their phone in their haste to escape, and Karen bent down to pick it up. On the screen, frozen mid-playback, was a familiar image. Her own face, red and furious, screaming at the camera. Her stomach dropped. No, it couldn't be. She tapped the screen hesitantly, and the video resumed playing. There she was, pounding on the door, yelling at invisible enemies, looking utterly ridiculous. Her blood ran cold. How had this gotten out? Who filmed it? And why did it have thousands of views already? Panic gripped her chest as she scrolled through the comments. Most were harmless jokes, but some stung deeply. "Classic Karen move," one person wrote. "Always thinks she's entitled to everything." Another chimed in, "This is peak entertainment. Thank you, random angry woman. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. Karen clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to march outside and confront whoever had done this. But deep down she knew it wouldn't help. The damage was done. Her humiliation was immortalized in pixels, available for anyone with Wi-Fi to see. She stormed back to the front desk where the receptionist was typing furiously on her computer. "Who posted that video?" Karen demanded, slamming the phone down on the counter. "Take it down right now." The receptionist blinked innocently, though there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I didn't post anything. That must have been someone else." "Don't lie to me," Karen hissed, leaning closer. "I saw you laughing earlier. You're the one who recorded it, aren't you?" The room fell silent. Everyone within earshot turned to watch the showdown unfold. The receptionist hesitated, clearly torn between denying responsibility and owning up to her mistake. Finally, she sighed. "Okay, fine, I sent it to a friend, but I didn't think it would blow up like this. I swear I never meant for it to go viral." Karen stared at her, speechless. Part of her wanted to throttle the woman right then and there, but instead she grabbed her phone and stormed toward the exit, muttering under her breath about lawyers and lawsuits. As she pushed open the heavy glass door, flashes went off outside. Dozens of cameras clicked simultaneously, blinding her momentarily. Reporters, lots of them. They swarmed around her like bees, firing questions left and right. "Ma'am, can you comment on the viral video? Why did you try to force your way into the building? Do you regret your actions?" Karen froze, overwhelmed. For once, she had no sharp retort, no cutting remark. All she could do was shield her face with her arms and stumble toward her car. The crowd followed her, shouting louder, snapping photos, recording videos. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them twice before finally unlocking the door. Once inside, she locked it immediately and slumped into the seat, trembling. Her phone buzzed non-stop in her lap. Notifications flooded in, texts, calls, emails, all from strangers asking for interviews or offering unsolicited advice. One message caught her eye. "You're famous now, congrats." Famous? Is that what this was? Being laughed at by millions of people counted as fame? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, ignoring the reporters chasing after her. She drove aimlessly for hours, putting as much distance between herself and the chaos as possible. By the time she got home, the sun had set, casting long shadows across her empty driveway. Inside, she collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark TV screen. For the first time in years, she felt truly small, humiliated, and utterly powerless. But even as she sat there, defeated, the world kept spinning. Memes continued to multiply. Late-night talk show hosts joked about her on air. Strangers debated whether she deserved sympathy or ridicule. Meanwhile, the community center basked in its newfound spotlight, with visitors flocking to see the infamous Karen Dorr for themselves. And somewhere, hidden among the noise, a quiet voice whispered, "What happens next?" The next morning, Karen woke up feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. Her head throbbed, her eyes were puffy from crying herself to sleep, and her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She groaned as she reached for it, half expecting more notifications about memes or cruel comments. But instead she saw something worse. Emails from lawyers. Apparently someone had filed a formal complaint against her at the community center. Someone, probably the receptionist who recorded the video, had reported her behavior to management. Now they were threatening legal action if she didn't issue an apology and drop any claims she might have made. An apology? For what? Getting trapped between two doors because of their faulty security system? Karen sat upright, her blood boiling, all over again. "This is insane," she muttered, tossing her phone onto the bed. How dare they turn this around on her? She was the victim here. Or, at least that's what she told herself. Deep down, though, doubt crept in. Maybe she had gone too far. Maybe storming into the building uninvited wasn't the best idea. And maybe, just maybe, she should have handled things differently. But admitting that would mean swallowing her pride. And Karen Whitmore wasn't about to do that. Instead, she fired off a strongly worded email to the community center's director, denying everything. "I was falsely accused of trespassing," she typed furiously. "Furthermore, I believe my rights were violated when unauthorized footage of me was shared without consent." By the time she hit send, she felt a tiny spark of satisfaction. At least now they knew she wasn't going down without a fight. Her next move was damage control. She called a lawyer, a friend of her husband's, and explained the situation, or rather, her version of it. The lawyer listened patiently before delivering some sobering news. "Look," he said bluntly, "you're not exactly coming off as the sympathetic party here. If you sue them, it'll only draw more attention to the whole thing. Trust me, sometimes it's better to let these things blow over." Karen wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. Suing anyone would make her look even worse. Besides, lawsuits took time and money, two things she didn't have in abundance. Reluctantly, she agreed to sit tight and wait it out. Meanwhile, the world outside continued spinning faster than ever. People couldn't get enough of Trapped. Karen. Late-night comedians roasted her mercilessly, turning her futile struggle with the doors into punchlines. One host joked, "If you're stuck between two doors, maybe don't bang on the glass like King Kong trying to break free from his chains." Another quipped, "Next time, just use the front entrance. It's called common courtesy, Karen." Cringed every time she heard one of these jokes, which happened far too often. It seemed like everywhere she turned, people were talking about her. Neighbors whispered behind hedges. Grocery store clerks avoided eye contact. Even her book club group chat went eerily silent after she joined a conversation about local news. She could practically hear the unspoken question hanging in the air. Is this really happening to her? Desperate to escape the scrutiny, Karen decided to lay low for a while. She canceled plans, ignored calls, and spent most of her days holed up, at home binge-watching old TV shows. Anything to distract herself from the chaos swirling around her. But no matter how many episodes of sitcoms she watched, nothing could drown out the nagging voice in her head telling her this was all her fault. One evening, as she scrolled through social media yet again, she stumbled across something unexpected. Amidst the endless stream of memes and mocking comments, there was a thread where people were actually defending her. Well, sort of. "Okay, yeah, she messed up," one commenter wrote. "But haven't we all lost our cool at some point?" "Cut her a little slack," another chimed in. "Honestly, the real villains here are the people who filmed her and posted it online. That's invasion of privacy, plain and simple." Karen stared at the screen, stunned. For the first time since the incident, she felt a flicker of hope. Not everyone hated her. Some people understood, or at least tried to, that she was human just like them. Flawed, yes, but still deserving of basic kindness. Encouraged by this glimmer of support, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She drafted a short statement and posted it online. "To those affected by recent events," she began, cautiously, "I regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred. While I maintain that I was unfairly treated, I acknowledge that my actions may have appeared unreasonable. Moving forward, I hope to resolve this peacefully. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it sounded stiff and rehearsed, but it was a start." To her surprise, the response was mixed. Some people applauded her for owning up to her mistakes, however vaguely. Others dismissed her words as insincere or self-serving. Either way, the statement marked a turning point. Karen realized she couldn't change the past, but she could try to learn from it. Slowly, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as possible under the circumstances. The frenzy surrounding her died down, replaced by newer, shinier scandals. Reporters stopped camping outside her house. Memes featuring her face faded from view. Even the hashtag #TrappedKaren lost its luster. Still, the scars remained. Friends she thought she could count on drifted away, uncomfortable with the drama she brought into their lives. Strangers still recognized her occasionally, pointing and whispering. Once, while waiting in line at a coffee shop, someone asked if she was That lady from the viral video. Humiliated, she fled without ordering anything. Through it all, Karen struggled to figure out who she was now. Was she the angry woman caught on camera losing her temper? Or was she something more? Something better? These questions haunted her, late at night when sleep refused to come. Eventually, she found herself sitting in a therapist's office pouring her heart out to a stranger. "I feel like I ruined my life," she admitted tearfully. "And for what? A stupid gym membership?" The therapist nodded sympathetically. "It's easy to focus on the negatives right now," she said gently. "But remember, growth often comes from discomfort. What can you take away from this experience?" Karen thought about it long and hard. Finally, she spoke. Maybe I need to be less quick to react, less focused on proving I'm right all the time. Sometimes letting go is harder than fighting back." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. A small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. She didn't have all the answers yet, and she knew healing wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Little did she know the story wasn't quite finished. Outside her window, the world kept turning, oblivious to the lessons learned within those four walls. Somewhere, another chapter was waiting to unfold, one that none of them could predict. Karen thought she'd finally hit rock bottom. She'd issued her awkward apology online, tried to lay low, and even started seeing a therapist. But just when she thought the world had moved on, something strange happened. People kept talking about her. Only this time it wasn't all bad. The community center became an unlikely celebrity overnight. Visitors poured in from neighboring towns, eager to see the infamous Karen Dorr for themselves. Some came out of curiosity, others for laughs, but everyone seemed fascinated by the story behind the viral video. The staff couldn't believe their luck. Attendance skyrocketed, membership sign-ups tripled, and local businesses nearby reported record sales as tourists flocked to the area. To capitalize on the buzz, the center launched a quirky ad campaign titled, "Don't Get Locked Out, Join Us Instead." It featured cartoon illustrations of angry stick figures banging on doors, accompanied by cheerful slogans like, "We promise not to trap you unless you try to break in." People ate it up. Social media influencers posted selfies in front of the side entrance where Karen had gotten stuck, turning what was once an ordinary building into a bizarre tourist attraction. Inside, employees hung a framed printout of the viral video near the front desk, complete with a caption that read, "Lesson learned. Always check your membership before entering." Customers found it hilarious, snapping photos and tagging the center in their posts. Even the maintenance worker who'd let Karen out became somewhat of a local hero, earning endless pats on the back for his role in the saga. Meanwhile, Karen watched all of this unfold from afar, grinding her teeth in frustration. Every mention of the community center felt like salt being rubbed into an open wound. How could they profit off her humiliation? Didn't anyone care about the real person behind the meme? But here's the thing about fame. Even unwanted fame, it forces you to confront things you'd rather ignore. For Karen, that meant facing not just the public spectacle, but also the parts of herself she didn't like admitting existed. "Over to you." Coffee one morning, her husband dropped a bombshell. "You know," he said cautiously, stirring sugar into his cup, "maybe you should think about, I don't know, joining the place." Karen nearly choked on her latte. "Are you serious?" she sputtered. "After everything they've done?" He shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I'm just saying it might show people you're willing to move past this. Plus it's kind of ironic, right? Like, owning the moment." She stared at him, torn between outrage and reluctant admiration for his logic. Was he suggesting she join the very place that had made her the butt of countless jokes? The idea was absurd. And yet, maybe there was something to it. Maybe showing up, swallowing her pride, and becoming a member would prove she wasn't afraid to face her mistakes head-on. Against her better judgment, and much to her husband's surprise, she decided to give it a shot. A few days later, she walked through the front doors of the community center, heart pounding in her chest. This time, she didn't storm in demanding access. Instead, she approached the receptionist with forced politeness, holding up a checkbook. Hi, she said stiffly, forcing a smile. I'd like to sign up for a membership, please. The receptionist blinked, clearly caught off guard. Then slowly, a grin spread across her face. Well, she said, typing something into her computer. Looks like we've got ourselves a full circle moment. Karen gritted her teeth but nodded politely. She handed over her payment and received a shiny new membership card in return. As she turned to leave, she noticed a small crowd gathered nearby, whispering and pointing. Her cheeks burned, but she held her head high. If they wanted to stare, fine, let them. She wasn't going to let this define her anymore. Over the next few weeks, Karen made a conscious effort to visit the gym regularly. At first, it was awkward. People recognized her immediately, some snickering under their breath while others gave her curious glances. One woman even asked if she planned to break into the locker rooms next. Karen forced herself to laugh along, though inside she cringed, but gradually something shifted. The more she showed up, the less people seemed to care about her past antics. They began treating her like any other member, nodding hello, sharing equipment, occasionally chatting. About workout routines, sure there were still whispers now and then, but they grew fewer and farther between. One day, as she finished her usual treadmill session, a young mom approached her hesitantly. Hi, the woman said, shifting nervously. I just wanted to say, I get it. Being a mom is hard enough without feeling like everyone's watching your every move. Sometimes we snap, you know? Karen blinked, taken aback. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. For so long, she'd been convinced the world hated her, that she was nothing more than a punchline. But this stranger, this random person, was offering her grace instead of judgment. Thank you, Karen replied softly, her voice cracking slightly. That means a lot. Word spread quickly among the staff that Karen was making an effort to turn things around. To their credit, they didn't hold grudges. In fact, they went out of their way to make her feel welcome. The director invited her to a special members-only event, where she mingled with other attendees and even managed to crack a genuine smile. By the end of the night, someone joked about starting a support group called Former Karens Anonymous. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Karen laughed along, raising her glass in mock salute. Behind the scenes, however, not everything was sunshine and rainbows. Back home, Karen struggled to reconcile the person she used to be with, the person she wanted to become. Old habits died hard. There were moments when frustration bubbled over, tempting her to lash out or demand things go her way. But each time she reminded herself of the lessons she'd learned: patience, humility, and the power of owning up to mistakes. Her transformation wasn't lost on those closest to her. Her husband noticed she seemed lighter somehow, less quick to anger, more willing to listen. Neighbors who had distanced themselves during the height of the scandal started reaching out again, inviting her to barbecues and book clubs. Even her therapist remarked on her progress, praising her for embracing vulnerability instead of hiding behind defensiveness. As months passed, the initial frenzy surrounding Karen's story faded into the background. Memes stopped appearing. Hashtags disappeared and strangers stopped recognizing her in public. Life returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after such an ordeal. Still, the experience left its mark, not just on Karen, but on everyone involved. The community center continued thriving, thanks in part to the publicity. Employees joked about writing a book detailing the chaos of that fateful day. Tourists still trickled in occasionally, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary Karen door. But for the most part, the madness quieted down. For Karen, the journey wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it, and maybe even finding a silver lining along the way. She realized that sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in embarrassment and laughter. And while she wouldn't wish the experience on anyone, she couldn't deny it had changed her for the better. Little did she know, though, that her story was far from over. Somewhere out there, a podcast host was already planning an episode exploring modern entitlement culture. The title? When Entitlement Meets Humiliation: The Untold Story of Trapped Karen. Karen's phone buzzed late one evening, lighting up with a notification. Another interview request, another chance to share her side of the story. She sighed, staring at the screen for a long moment before hitting delete. Enough was enough. She'd faced her demons, owned her mistakes, and moved forward. Whatever came next, she'd handle it on her own terms. Months had passed since Karen first walked through the doors of the community center, not as an angry intruder this time, but as a paying member. Life had settled into a new rhythm, quieter and less chaotic than before. The memes and jokes about her viral moment were now buried deep in internet archives, replaced by newer scandals and fleeting trends. For most people, Trapped Karen was just another forgotten headline. But for Karen, the memory lingered like a scar, visible only to her but always there. One evening, as she scrolled through social media, she stumbled across something unexpected. A podcast episode titled, "When Entitlement Meets Humiliation, The Untold Story of Trapped Karen." Her stomach dropped. Podcasts? Seriously? She clicked play hesitantly, half expecting to hear cruel mockery or exaggerated retellings of her misadventure. But what she heard instead surprised her. The host opened with a thoughtful question. Why do stories like this capture our attention so intensely? Is it because we see ourselves in them? Or because we're relieved they didn't happen to us? From there, the conversation shifted into a deeper exploration of human behavior. Experts weighed in on topics like entitlement culture, public shaming, and the fine line between humor and cruelty. Karen listened intently, her initial defensiveness giving way to curiosity. One expert, a psychologist specializing in online behavior, spoke about how public humiliation often serves as a mirror for society. When someone makes a mistake and gets called out, he explained, we tend to focus on their flaws while ignoring our own. It's easier to laugh at someone else's downfall than confront the ways we might be guilty of similar behaviors. Another guest, a former viral sensation herself, shared her experience of being ridiculed online after a workplace mishap went viral. At first, I hated everyone who laughed at me, she admitted. But over time, I realized that laughter isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's just human. People connect through shared experiences, even if those experiences are embarrassing or awkward. Karen paused the podcast, staring blankly at her phone. Was that really how people saw her? Not as the villain she'd feared she'd become, but as a flawed, relatable person caught in an absurd situation? The thought was both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it meant she wasn't alone. Unsettling because it forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. She finished listening to the episode later that night, unable to shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, her story had meaning beyond the laughs and memes. By the end, the host concluded with a poignant message. Humor has a way of bringing people together, but it can also tear them apart. What matters most is what happens after the joke fades. Do we use these moments to grow, to empathize, or do we let shame define us forever? The words stayed with Karen long after the podcast ended. They echoed in her mind as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. For weeks afterward, she found herself reflecting on her journey, the mistakes she'd made, the lessons she'd learned, and the surprising ways life had changed since that fateful day. Her transformation hadn't been easy. There were days when old habits crept back in, tempting her to snap at strangers or demand special treatment. But each time, she reminded herself of the cost of entitlement. She remembered the sting of judgment, the weight of public scrutiny, and the loneliness that came with alienating others. Those memories kept her grounded, pushing her to choose humility over pride. Slowly but surely, Karen began rebuilding her relationships. Neighbors who had once avoided her started inviting her to barbecues and block parties. Friends she'd pushed away reached out, cautiously at first, but with genuine warmth. Even her husband noticed a difference. "You seem lighter," he said one evening over dinner. "Like you're finally letting go." Karen smiled faintly, stirring her soup. Letting go wasn't easy. It never was, but it felt good. Like shedding layers of armor she no longer needed. For so long, she'd worn anger and frustration like a shield. protecting herself from vulnerability. Now she was learning to embrace imperfection, to accept that making mistakes didn't make her less worthy of love or respect. Her newfound perspective extended beyond personal relationships. At work, she became more patient with colleagues, listening instead of interrupting. In line at the grocery store, she resisted the urge to complain when the cashier took too long. And at the community center, she even volunteered to help organize events, earning smiles and nods of approval from staff and members alike. One afternoon, as she stood near the infamous side door, a young man approached her hesitantly. He looked nervous, clutching a clipboard and glancing around like he expected someone to yell at him. "Excuse me," he stammered. "Are you, that lady?" Karen braced herself, expecting ridicule. Instead, the man grinned sheepishly. "I just wanted to say thanks. Your story kind of inspired me to chill out a little. I used to get mad all the time over dumb stuff, but hearing about everything you went through made me realize it's not worth it." She blinked, caught off guard. "Really?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah. You turned a bad situation into something positive. That takes guts." For the first time in years, Karen felt a swell of pride. Not the defensive, entitled kind, but the quiet, earned kind. Pride in knowing she hadn't let her lowest moment define her. Pride in choosing growth over bitterness. As months turned into a year, Karen continued moving forward, embracing the lessons she'd learned. She still cringed occasionally when reminded of her viral fame, but she no longer let it control her. Instead, she focused on the present, on being kinder, more patient, and more self-aware. And then, one crisp autumn morning, she received an email from the community center. It was an invitation to speak at their annual fundraiser gala, an event celebrating resilience and second chances. The subject line read, "Will you be our guest speaker?" Karen stared at the screen, heart racing. Speak publicly about her experience? About the very thing that had humiliated her? It sounded terrifying. But as she thought about it, she realized it wasn't just her story anymore. It belonged to everyone who had laughed, judged, empathized, or grown alongside her. Maybe sharing it could help others avoid the same pitfalls, or at least remind them that redemption was possible. With trembling hands, she typed her response. Yes. On the night of the gala, Karen stood backstage, adjusting her dress and practicing deep breaths. As she stepped onto the stage, applause greeted her, not mocking or sarcastic, but warm and encouraging. She scanned the crowd, recognizing familiar faces. Neighbors, co-workers, gym buddies, and even the receptionist who'd recorded the video. They weren't here to laugh at her. They were here to celebrate her journey. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside. "A few years ago, I would have told you I didn't belong here, that I was too angry, too stubborn, too flawed to deserve a second chance. But life has a funny way of teaching us things we don't want to learn. And sometimes those lessons come wrapped in embarrassment and laughter." The audience chuckled softly, nodding along. She smiled, pausing to collect her thoughts. "What I've realized is this. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, sometimes big ones, and we all have moments where we wish the ground would swallow us whole. But those moments don't define us. What defines us is how we choose to move forward." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "So if you take anything away from my story tonight, let it be this. Don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong. Don't let shame keep you stuck. And above all, remember that even in our darkest moments, there's always room for growth, for grace, for hope." As she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Tears pricked her eyes, but she held them back, smiling gratefully at the sea of faces before her. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Not as trapped Karen, but as a human being capable of change. Outside, the crisp autumn air greeted her as she left the building. Streetlights cast golden pools of light across the parking lot, and for a moment she paused to soak it all in. Life wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But that was okay. Growth wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it, and maybe even finding beauty in the cracks. Little did she know her story was already inspiring others. Across town, a teenager watched the gala highlights online, whispering to herself, "If she can turn things around, maybe I can, too." Somewhere else, a struggling parent replayed the speech, drawing strength from Karen's words. And somewhere far away, a stranger scrolled past a meme of Karen banging on the glass, stopping to wonder, what happened next? Because that's the thing about stories. They don't end when the cameras stop rolling. They ripple outward, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. And for Karen, that was enough.